Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donato Cabrera, music director of the California Symphony and Las Vegas Philharmonic. Welcome back to Music Wise. I think many people have said this, that their favorite shows, and they really have been mine as well, have been the shows with composers. And I think there are a variety of reasons for that. And our guest today is no exception. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that what they do is just so interesting and so, in many ways, a mystery, even to fellow artists. It's primarily a singular and private affair, what they do, and it's fascinating to have the opportunity to talk with a composer, to just hear how that process is revealed, and to just get a behind the scenes look into the creative process. My friend Nathaniel Stookey is, and we will talk about how we first met, because my memory, I think, is fairly accurate. But we have known each other for quite a long time, and have a very strong personal and professional relationship. Of course, both the California Symphony and Las Vegas Philharmonic have performed works of his, which we will, of course, discuss. And so he is no stranger to those of you who are watching who have been to those concerts. But Nathaniel has a wonderfully varied and fantastic catalog of music that I love exploring, because it's like a new chapter in one of your favorite books that you start reading. You're like, oh wow, I didn't know this story was going to head in this direction, and I love him for that. So help me welcome Nathaniel Stookey. Hi, Nat.
Hi, Donato. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you could join us, and I have to say we still have maintained, however sporadically it is, the way we have, I think, the way we originally met, which is over a glass of wine, over a beer, and we have still to this day, even though it's now socially distanced, have wonderful conversations about all things art, and it is, I think, true. That's how we originally met, which is through this wonderful consortium of rogues that met at this beer and sausage gathering, which started, maybe you can remember the date, but I'm guessing now is approaching 15 years ago. Maybe?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Around 2005, as Daniel and I were working on The Composer is Dead, I think that's more or less when it started.
And it occurred to me this morning, and I think a lot of us, of course, over this past year have put it in the back of our minds and to not think about it too much, because it just is sad otherwise, that these sort of gatherings are really crucial for how art and culture is maintained. And while we've tried our best through various means, including what we're doing right now, to maintain connectivity, it doesn't come close to what we started 15 years ago.
No beer. There is no beer here.
Or sausages.
Or sausages. Yes, it is. It's a sad thing, and especially for me. I mean, you mentioned in the introduction what a solitary job composing is. Well, on the plus side, I'm used to it, but on the minus side, I'm really dependent on things like
Looks like we perhaps have lost Nathaniel, which is has happened in the past. Let's see here. What we're going to do, if Nat is still trying to rejoin, is we're going to play our first excerpt. So Maggie, what did we have lined up first? I guess it is this, our Zippers clip. And before we play Zippers, we will let me give you an introduction to this really amazing work. It's a project that Nat and I worked together about 5 years ago. Is it an opera? Yes. Is it also an incredible symphonic piece that can be performed by symphony orchestras? Yes. It sort of defies genre, but it uses orchestral musicians. It uses singers, but they aren't necessarily opera singers. And here we have Nat again. Hi, Nat. I was just going. Yeah, no, this might happen. This is totally fine. It's live TV. Just okay. Imagine you're, in the glory days of, the 1940s, Jack Benny. So I was just introducing Zippers, which is, I think, a good way for us to start. Because it's something that you were so kind to include me in this process, and I was attempting to describe Zippers because it's a whole bunch of things. It's a story of what it is rather than what it isn't, right?
Yes, it's a hot mess.
Tell us a little bit about what. Well, you know what, Maggie, why don't we just play it first, and then we can try to dissect it after that.
Any first date is a strange thing, like two actors reading two different scripts at the same time.
How was it, our first date?
Any first date is a strange thing, like two singers who have slipped out of sync on the same line. How was it, our first date?
Well, any first date is a strange thing.
How was it, our first date?
Like two therapists with two different takes on the same dream.
Any first date is a strange thing.
How was it, our first date?
Like two players playing two mirrored views of the same theme.
I hope to, wish to, want to, long to make you see I am so much more than I appear to be. We go to a cute little place I know, crab cakes and Beaujolais, friendly and romantic.
Go to one of those French-style dives, long on atmosphere, short on epicure.
We go to a cute little place I know, crab cakes and Beaujolais,
friendly and romantic.
I know it's not classically French, but he says something so incredibly pretentious.
For me, saffron shouldn't be tasted. It should be suspected.
Yeah, it was a rough start. I laughed and good sign. He laughs,
she laughs too. So we go for a long walk and laugh some more and talk.
Laugh some more and talk. accidentally touch? Did his touch mean my touch touched him? Did his touch mean,
Did her touch mean
my touch
my
touched
touch
him?
touched her? What
What did his touch mean?
Thanks, Maggie. Aside from the fact that it so perfectly captures that awkward moment of when we've all been there, potentially exciting, potentially not, of those first dates. This piece was so fun to be a part of because it's music that uses traditional orchestral instruments to create something that it normally is created by some electronics only now in today's world of hip hop. And the two singers, Robin Kumar and Manuel Feliciano, are trained in a certain sense. Manuel, especially, sort of the classic Broadway trained voice, but an incredible musician. Robin is your classic, singer who can get up in a bar and just bring the house down. Tell us a little bit about how this came together, because this is going to lead into your current project, which is so fun and fascinating.
Well, it came together from a bunch of different angles. I mean, as you said, I'm always kind of looking for a departure within my own work, in that I tend, after finishing a string quartet, to want to write for orchestra. And when I've done something serious, I tend to want to do something silly, just as a kind of, change of pace. So this came about a couple of reasons. One is that I'd always wanted to do something with my friend Manuel, who sings the male lead. We grew up together. He's also a violinist. But I had seen him in a couple of his shows, notably Sweeney Todd in its revival by John Doyle on Broadway. We actually worked together with John Doyle, so there was like a part of it was a desire to do something that melded our musical worlds, which began sort of melded because we were in the same violin studio. Another influence was this poet, Dan Harder, who wrote poems that he calls zipper poems. And the premise of a zipper poem is that you have a poem on each page, facing each other, and you can read them independently, or you can alternate lines and zip these poems together to make kind of a different and sometimes larger meaning. So because he had these poems called zipper poems, I started thinking about writing a piece from them, and it was hard to conceive of a piece involving zippers that wasn't about sex. So hence the whole dating premise of the piece actually grew out of this form of experimental poetry. So yeah.
Well, I mean, this is, and we'll talk about this more with the piece you're currently working on. But the idea of, and I'd like to just focus on the music of zippers. How did you come up with the concept of recreating a style of music that is essentially created entirely in a studio in today's world, versus and yet using orchestral instruments or acoustic instruments?
Yeah, not just using them. I mean, it's played by a full symphony orchestra. So it's an orchestra piece. I guess the reason is, first of all, just being kind of bullish about the orchestra and what it can do, which is anything. I mean, a symphony orchestra and its players can do absolutely anything. So part of it was just, well, you know, we can treat this as a really big band. But of course, you know, writing it when I did, I wanted it to sound like, what would a live big band sound like today? You know, of course, it would be influenced by all the music that we hear today. So it would have, you know, elements of hip hop and elements of techno, all of which orchestral musicians can play, no problem. All you have to do is write it for them. So I wanted it to sound, I mean, it actually moves, you know, there are also waltzes in it. There's a lot of dance influenced music. But I just wanted to treat the orchestra, yeah, as a band, like a really, really, the biggest band on earth, basically.
I remember that, you know, there's yet one more component that I found very fascinating, was that we, of course, when we recorded it, we used acoustic instruments to make these sounds happen. But it was, I thought it was really wonderful that you still wanted it on the recording to have that sound of a hip hop record, that particular or techno, and that recording process is a different process, of course, than if you were to record something in Davies Symphony Hall or any symphonic hall around the world. Talk a little bit about that, because that was a journey unto itself.
It was, and a much more challenging journey than I anticipated. I mean, one problem with turning a new leaf every time you start a piece is you're always behind the curve. So the process of taking this from a live piece in a symphony hall to recording was a much bigger project. It involved using an orchestra that was kind of split up into parts and then being mixed, you know, by someone who mixes hip hop. And in fact, the same guy who mixes Childish Gambino. And the process for me, though, was really fun at every stage, because, I mean, one of the things that makes composing exciting is this interaction with other musicians, and the fact it really doesn't matter what sphere they're from. Like a really great mixer has the same kind of approach as a really great conductor. I mean, they're thinking about levels, and they're thinking about balance, and they're thinking about the shapes of sounds, but it's all like Greek to me. In fact, I remember working with a band at one point on a different project, and having them laughing that among us musicians, half of what we say is in Italian. Totally foreign to them. They're like, what are they talking about? It's really, we use a lot of Italian. Anyway, to me, all that was Greek, but I still loved it.
Well, opera has, since zippers, and possibly before zippers, the world of opera, the world of using words continues to play an important part in your compositions, and which leads us to this exciting new project that you're currently in the midst of. I know that I remember just a couple of weeks ago getting an excited text from you that, you know, that you're finished with the parts, and so tell us about this new project, because it's in collaboration with an organization, with an opera company that I have great respect for, and is a real driving force in the Bay Area community and beyond.
Yes, I'm really excited to be working with them. This is West Edge Opera Company in the East Bay. I first discovered them because they did a production of Tom Addis's Powder Her Face in an abandoned train station in Oakland, and it was just such an amazing and very theatrical setting for opera. This sort of derelict Beaux-Arts train station. It was the setting alone was exciting, and then the production was as well. So I started having conversations with them, and this project that grew out of it is a Northern California story set in Boonville, which is a little town north of San Francisco in Mendocino County that has its own dialect, a very, very rich dialect. And, you know, as you said, I have this kind of long-standing interest in language. My dad was a novelist and my mom was a drama teacher. So there was like, I was the only musician in the house. Everyone else was dealing with words all the time. So storytelling and those sorts of things are kind of in my wheelhouse, even though prior to The Composer is Dead, I hadn't really used them that much. I was definitely an instrumental composer, and I was mostly writing string quartets and orchestral music. So that gear change started to happen actually around the time we met, I guess around 2005. Though I still like to write instrumental music.
Well, I think that this new project, tell us a little bit about the connection between zippers and Bullwhip.
So that is actually an amazing connection and a true coincidence of this sort of almost celestial type. The premiere of Zippers, which we just heard an excerpt from, was sung by my friend Manuel Feliciano, who sang on the recording, and Issa Davis. It was with Oakland Symphony. Michael Morgan conducted. This is around, I don't know, 2009 or something like that. So Issa was a colleague, is a colleague of Manuel's, and he knew her as a singer and an actress, and that's how she was brought into this performance. Years later, I guess last summer, I was looking for a Northern California story that I could really sink my teeth into, and I came across like this perfect play, the perfect play. And lo and behold, it was by Issa Davis, who sang Zippers. And so fortunately, I was still in touch with her. I had her number. So I just texted her and said, oh my God, I just read this play and I really want to make an opera out of it. Can I? And she said, yeah. So
and folks, that's how art is made. Beer and sausages and, you know, collaborations lead to other collaborations.
So the reason it's such an amazing coincidence, though, is that, I mean, to end up collaborating years down the line with a musician you've collaborated with, that happens, of course. Like, you know, you and I collaborate together and then we collaborate together again. But what was amazing was not even realizing that she had this whole other life and world. This play was, you know, nominated or a Pulitzer finalist actually in 2007. So yeah, I mean, she's really a playwright, as well as being a great singer and actress.
Tell us a little bit more. I'm very curious about this. Is she from Boonville? Did she know about that world? What is, because that's such a fascinating story. That are there still people that speak in this dialect?
There are. I've been in touch with some of the old timers who still speak Boontling. I don't know, you know, the extent to which it's spoken. It was a very, very rich dialect. There's a dictionary of Boontling. I mean, hundreds of words, and you can say, in fact, there are going to be passages in the opera that are incomprehensible to English speakers because they're only speaking in Boontling. It is, you know, bordering on a language, really, though it's based in English. English. Her connection to Boonville is that she grew up in Berkeley and had family who lived there, or had a house up there or something like that. So she was acquainted with it. I think being from Northern California, it's sort of a little bit part of the Northern California mythology. We've kind of heard tell of this place, but she had a more personal connection and actually spent time up there. I also have friends. In fact, Gabriella Frank, who was one of your guests, wonderful composer, lives in Boonville or near Boonville.
That's right.
So it is a remote, but let's just say it's less remote now. We wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be the source of a new dialect at this point. It's not that remote.
That's right. And I'm sure some of us are curious watching today, the process by which one, it's one thing to go see a production at an opera company and know the composer, which you did. It's another thing then years later to be commissioned by that very same opera company and go through that process of birthing a new work together with that opera company. Touch upon that a little bit, because it's not there isn't some sort of a cut and dried process by which that occurs.
No, and in fact, they've been really great about shaping that process. I think this is their first commission. I could be wrong about that, but West Edge's strength has been taking new work that has had a performance and doing, repeat performances. In any case, they were very open to shaping this process in a way that I thought would support the creation of the opera, which has a lot of pitfalls because, as you know, from working in opera, there are just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot can go wrong in opera. And because of that, and because I had experienced one of the non-classical projects that I did, as I kind of alluded to, was working with the director John Doyle, who made that production Sweeney Todd to create a new version of Brecht's Caucasian Chalk Circle with ACT in San Francisco. So I had, both through that experience and through my mother's being a director and drama teacher, kind of a sense of the way this process works in the theater, that, workshops and the length of the development process, the possibility of hearing samples of things versus just suddenly being brought together with this thing that has a budget of millions of dollars and a tight timeline and walking that sort of tightrope. So West Edge has built into the process a lot of opportunities for me to hear and tweak over the commission and up to the premiere, which is in August, or was slated to be, and we're still working out the details, but slated to be in August of 2023. So for example, in May, quite soon, they're doing an excerpt on their Snapshot series, which presents, smaller bits of operas. And in this case, will kind of serve as a way for us to have a pre-listen, a sneak peek, very valuable to me. And also, a way for the audience to kind of get a sense of what's coming and where it's going and what the story is about, without revealing the whole story.
It is interesting that you bring this process up, because up until recently, the idea of having previews, which is such a crucial and critical process in the world of Broadway, of musical theater. In other words,
yes.
something opens, something that's slated to end up on Broadway will actually have its first performance, say, in Omaha. And in Omaha, they'll run the show, and that'll be, and then every night the composer and the director and the librettist, they hear what jokes worked and what songs had good impact, the general pacing, and then maybe even during the course of the run in Omaha they make changes. But then when it then goes from Omaha to San Francisco, and then it will have revisions. And then by the time it gets to Broadway, that it's sort of become this jewel that's been chiseled and shined and it's best possible self. It's still to this point in opera that still doesn't quite happen in the same way, because yes, there are what you have now, these workshops, but it's not like operas have a run in Omaha with, Metro, the opera company Omaha, and then there's a slew of commissioners that will, when it ends up at the Met, it's not the same. So actually, it's crucial that you have this opportunity in these workshops to hear the piece, to see how it flows musically for the director, to see how it is fitting together, so that you guys can make the best possible version of itself for that premiere.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, and I think that the opera world will probably move in this direction to some extent, because we want what comes out of these commissions to be successful and lasting. There are, of course, a lot of reasons why it hasn't happened this way. One is that, Broadway is a commercial enterprise, and there's, the process just has different funding structure. There are so many things that are different about the process. But another is that I think we've tended to mythologize classical composers as being sort of, above earthly concerns. We just sort of hatch these genius ideas, which, I have no objection to genius. That's all well and good. But the fact is that everyone benefits from hearing their work and seeing how it flows. Even if no one had any voice in this at all but the composer, it would still be beneficial, because just to hear the thing and experience it is different from the way you imagine it, or the way your crappy computer bleeps and bloops at you. This is, I think, really, really valuable. And for me, coming from that theater experience, very close to the sort of process that I was hoping to have.
There's another opera that I'd like to that you composed that I think would be wonderful to talk a little bit about, because the performance is of a local Bay Area wonderful soprano and artist, Marnie Breckenridge. It was originally brought to life in Memphis with Opera Memphis. Can you tell us a little bit about Yvonne? Because it's such a wonderful story, and I think what you did with it is wonderful. It's great.
Yvonne is one of those projects that I took on because I was wanting to turn the page and do something, and now for something completely different. It was Memphis Opera was commissioning pieces to be performed within the old Sears building that was no longer, that had been vacant for decades, but they had collected via oral history all of these stories that actually took place in the building. So the premiere of these little kind of mini operas was actually going to be happening in the place that the real stories took place, and that was kind of especially inspiring to me. And they commissioned a playwright, Jerry Dye, to take these oral histories and shape them into librettos, and gave me a choice of a number of stories. And I immediately fell in love with this character, Yvonne, who is sort of a very hard-edged 1950s or early 60s sort of Mad Men era office manager. She is just hard. She's hard on her employees. She's the head of a secretarial pool, and she starts her day putting on her lipstick in a very, very organized way. And the lipstick becomes sort of the window to her character, because she puts it on in the powder room of her office in this Sears building. And then later on in this mini opera, a terrible thing, a miscarriage happens in this same bathroom, and she has to go back. She has to basically go into her sanctuary to deal with this very upsetting situation. And the only way she can bring herself to speak to the people who are involved, which is the mother who's had the miscarriage and Jonette, who's a colleague who's actually caring for her, is to talk to them through the mirror in which she puts on her lipstick. So she's looking at herself, she's looking at the audience, and at the same time she's looking at where the action is actually happening. And there was just so much there. And then the piece ends, finally, well, I won't tell you what happens, but at the very end of the piece, she's just putting on her lipstick again in the same mirror. I mean, she just goes back to start like every day, only it's been this huge upheaval, transformative upheaval, which is really what opera is all about.
So we're going to play an excerpt. What part of the opera will we be watching?
So this is the moment. Oh, by the way, this is an unstaged version. It's such a wonderful performance by Marnie Breckenridge. Marnie Breckenridge, that I wanted to share it. And this was also part of West Edge Opera's Snapshot program, which is, again, this thing where they share bits of things that are either in process or are smaller or wouldn't have a chance to be heard otherwise. So in this unstaged version, Yvonne, played by Marnie, is just pushing open the door of the powder room, which is normally her sanctuary, but on this occasion is the scene of this terrible tragedy.
Okay.
There are no more words, no more sound, only my breath and the faucet dripping, drop, drop. The air is quick and thin. There's something wrong in here. I can feel it, smell it. A warm wall of pain
hear Jonette's voice from around the corner stall. Who's there? And is that blood a drop of red? The smallest drop. Then another. I wish I could unsee. Sweet Jesus, so much love. That girl like a rag like an animal ripped apart. So much blood, so much blood. Jeanette, it's me, Miss Plunkett. Everything will be okay. The ambulance is on its way. Just hold on. Everything will be okay. Just let me catch my breath. I can't move, I can't see for all the blood. The wall, the stall, the floor like fingers reaching across the tiles. I want to scream and falling back, I feel the sink behind its cold, startling, yet steady. I see your faces in my mirror. A picture in the glass, a million miles away. Just she's drifting off to some saucy island. Above Cleveland Avenue. Looking down on us. Looking down on her baby girl. I slip off my winter white coat. The baby up as if she were my own.
Wow, Marnie. He's such an amazing artist. And what a great moment, Nathaniel. Really, what I love about your vocal writing, and perhaps you can. This is difficult to perhaps to describe to the average person, but there is a skill of setting words to music to be sung, to reflect the character, to reflect the rhythm of the perhaps when it is spoken, so that the rhythm of the rhythm of the musical phrase perhaps mirrors in some way or helps to project the rhythm of how one would emote it as it is spoken. There's a whole slew of concerns when one is setting words to music, and some people have that skill in spades, and you do. And I think it's not, and to say that it is innate in you would be unfair to the fact that you have to your history as someone growing up in a household of folks who were concerned with words, obsessed with words. Can you tell us about this? We've talked about this before, just between the two of us, and I think it's a fascinating process.
Well, they're just different skills. I mean, and the real challenge with opera is that there are a lot of very different skills involved, only some of which are a composer's skills. To me, in a way, what I've found in starting, especially with Yvonne, it's almost like an actor's role, in that what an actor does when he or she starts learning a part is to figure out how to inhabit the character with their acting. And what I spend a lot of time doing is trying to inhabit the character just like an actor would. I mean, I actually go around. It would be very embarrassing to have this caught on camera, but I walk around, I talk as this person, I think as this person. I mean, it's like a sort of deep dive into their emotional world. And then, apart from that, there's the simple, impossibly complex to describe matter of setting text in a way that speaks, instead of just sort of arbitrarily putting a syllable per note and thinking that is going to deliver the goods. I mean, all of these things are complex and very different from each other, and don't have any part really in a composer's training. We don't learn these things. So I guess to get back to your point of my background in a storytelling family, is that these were skills that I really didn't use professionally. They were just part of my home life. And they weren't part of my training either, because I was trained as a violinist. I played in orchestra. I didn't have any particular interest in opera. I didn't have any strong interest in theater. But it was just part of my environment to have, for example, a mother who thought about diction. Well, that's just like chance. You have dinner with someone who thinks about diction every night, and you're going to end up thinking about diction whether you like it or not. So, it's like a confluence of a lot of different things, which is, I think, what makes it so satisfying for me, just in my own little world. I mean, this is apart from how well whatever I do will work, but in terms of the pleasure of engaging in this process when I'm not only getting to deal with music which I love to do, but also getting to think about character and how character is revealed, which I love to do, and also the way that words express a particular thing with like economy or not. You know, all of these things are fascinating and fun to me, and the opera just brings them all together in the greatest way that I love doing. I really love writing opera.
Well, it certainly shows, and I'm really excited about this upcoming project you have with West Edge. But going back a ways and sort of to help to introduce our final video, as you said earlier, that your initial fascination with music was really through the violin, and as so many of my guests have been affiliated in the past with the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra, you are no exception. And you were a member. How many years were you a member of played violin in the XFA? 2
years.
And before we introduce this next piece, which is a piece written for solo violin, your instrument, there has been a wonderful full circle that you're a part of now with the SFSYO, and it was something that had been in the back of my mind to begin when I was the music director there, but it came to be a couple of years after I left, and that you helped begin a program where you became a mentor to aspiring composers who were or are members of the SFSYO. Can you tell us about this, because it's so cool?
Well, in some ways it's related to what we were talking about with workshopping opera and theater, that in music, composers often don't get a chance to do that, to hear, how does this work? How does this work? And when you're young, especially, you have nothing to go on. It's really an obstacle not being able to actually hear these things. So I wrote all of my first pieces for friends who played in the orchestra with me. And so what I wanted to do was to create a similar opportunity where kids from the youth orchestra who were interested in composing could get together, write pieces for each other, play each other's stuff, record it, perform it. Because what we do is really much more, there's a whole craft aspect that is easily forgotten if you just study these things, in a university setting without actually having your hands in the materials. So I wanted to provide that sort of hands-on aspect.
And so now, how is it set up? Do you meet with whoever's interested after the rehearsal's over, and you create a performance opportunity for those?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, with COVID, everything has been.
Just pretend that doesn't exist.
Right, but basically, yes, there's a group of players from the orchestra who sign up for a season, and we meet once a month after rehearsal, and we do a couple of things together. One is a sort of on-the-spot composition where I will tell them, okay, this is what I want the parameters of your composition to be. I'm going to leave the room for 10 minutes, and when I come back, I expect to hear something. So they're kind of collaborating in a sort of, it's halfway between improvisation and like flash mob composition. And the point of it is to get them to think not just about like what notes I want to use, but also about how music works in time, how we pace things, how important, drama is, how important changes in dynamic are, that sort of thing. So we spend the first part of our meeting basically in this sort of middle ground between composition and improvisation. Then the second half, they have brought their own work that they've been working on, and we rehearse that and try to perfect it as much as possible, because one of the challenges with new music, especially if it's tricky, is to get it to the point where you can really evaluate it. Until you've got a pretty good version of something, it's hard to really judge how well it works, because sometimes people will say, oh, that's too hard, I can't do it, and they'll be right. Sometimes they'll say, oh, that's too hard, I can't do it, and they'll be wrong. And it'll be something incredible. So, you know, so we try to devote some time to bringing, to getting the best version of these pieces, so that the young composers can actually hear them, and then they might decide to make modifications and come back next month. Or they might decide, oh, that's exactly what I wanted, and have some sort of basis. I mean, Bach, you know, he got to write a cantata a week and actually hear it. No wonder he's so good.
Well, I mean, and that's the gift, because I think even by the time one is in high school, you get the impression that composers, that a composition is really only dried ink on a piece of paper. In other words, that's how it came off the tree. And that this process that you're revealing to these young composers is just that. Is that composition is a process. That it takes time. That it doesn't happen, and then it's as if it's one of the 10 commandments. It's an ever evolving thing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to this last incredible piece, and an example, of course, of a couple of things. Number one, of artists being driven to continue to communicate regardless of a pandemic or canceled performances. And it's also yet another example of again, this is a through thread of your being inspired by other types of art and connecting to other, whether it be poems, words, librettos, short stories, plays, or in this case, a work of visual art. Tell us about how this project came about, and who are the folks involved.
So this was initiated by Dan Flanagan, who coincidentally is concertmaster of West Edge Opera. So there's a nice little family connection here. He's also worked with you, I'm sure.
He's also a member of the California Symphony.
There we go. Yes, I'm sure I've worked with him, you know, a bunch of times over the past several years. In any case, he approached me, and he had started performing in front of his amazing collection of paintings. And he asked me to write a piece for this new series he was starting. And I said, well, I'd really like to, if I'm going to do this, which I was excited about, can I get to know one of your paintings better and have it be sort of my interaction with a particular painting? And so he sent me a bunch of pictures. Of course, we couldn't get together at this point. This was in the early days of the lockdown. A bunch of pictures of the paintings on his walls. And I right away gravitated towards this piece by Rachel Dwan, which you'll be able to see actually in the video. So, but I'll describe it a little bit. It's basically entirely grayscale. And it's a very quiet piece, but that has a lot of depth to it. I kind of imagine it as sort of like the surface of water that, you know, seems sort of simple or uniform, but you can kind of look through it at other things. And the painting is called Shadow Breaking. and something about the colors and the title just seemed like the sort of piece that I felt like writing in COVID, which is this sort of kind of shadowed time. So the piece is, I guess, about looking for light in this shadowed environment.
I think it's I haven't seen the painting in person yet, and Dan is such a wonderful character because he is an avid art collector, and he through the years has these open houses where you can come and view his art collection. Of course, that hasn't
It's amazing.
Yeah, it hasn't happened this year, but I can't wait to. But like with all works of art, you'll see the piece of art in this performance, sort of in the background. But I would imagine there's so much more when you see the piece in person, in terms of its contours and its three-dimensionality, that just doesn't translate.
Yeah, and he actually loaned the painting to me, so that was really great to have, the actual painting, because it is different. A painting in real life is not the same as a photograph of a painting at all. So I had it up for months and really spent, interestingly, a little bit like inhabiting the role that I was talking about in opera. Kind of the same process of just living with this image and just thinking about this picture a lot more than I've thought about any picture ever. I'm not especially well versed in visual art, and usually my approach to visual art is to maybe go to a museum one day and stand in front of a painting for like 2 minutes. That's a long time in front of a painting. Whereas this painting, I spent hours looking at, thinking about, and trying to kind of tap into, I guess.
Great. Let's watch the performance.
I've been making a living as a violinist since I finished school about 16 years ago.
He goes on, Nat, maybe you might want to just describe what he sort of talks about after that, because and we've put a link to the performance so you can watch the whole thing.
I think he describes the process that you and I talked about before, and then Dan has gone on to premiere pieces by other composers as well as his own work. So he's developed a whole series out of it. Definitely worth watching the rest if you're interested. Yeah,
most definitely. Well, just like that, like I said, these hours go by, and thank you for the engaging conversation. I have to agree with so many that I think speaking, it's in my opinion, and perhaps others would disagree, that really the reason people go to concerts, it's not to see the conductor, it's not to see the musicians on stage, it is still because of the music they hear. That composers are the reason why orchestras exist. It's the word. It's the truth. So it's an endlessly fascinating topic. So Nathaniel, thank you again for joining us on Music Wise. It's been a wonderful hour.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Next time with beer.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you next time.